Satan's gaze softened for a moment, and he shrugged. "Don't read too much into it," he said, though his tone lacked its usual sharpness. "I'm simply keeping you entertained." But as Liam turned back to admire the valley, Satan found himself unable to look away from the angel's serene expression. Satan tore his gaze away from Liam, forcing himself to focus on the valley below instead. He wasn't accustomed to this distraction. The angel's soft smile, the way his wings fluttered gently in the warm breeze, the pure and untainted aura that radiated from him. It was all so disarming. It was dangerous. He didn't like it. But he didn't stop it either. Liam, unaware of the inner conflict brewing in Satan, sat down at the edge of the cliff, tucking his legs beneath him. The glow of the flowers reflected in his wide, innocent eyes as he spoke softly. "It's strange," he said. "This place is nothing like heaven, but there's something about it, something oddly beautiful." Satan raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms as he leaned against a jagged boulder. "Beautiful? I don't often hear that word used to describe my realm." Liam glanced back at him, his expression earnest. "It's true. I mean, yes, it's dark and intimidating, but it has its own kind of beauty. Like these flowers," he said, gesturing to the glowing blooms below. "They're so vibrant, even in the darkness. Maybe, especially because of the darkness." Satan stared at him, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "You're an odd little thing," he muttered, more to himself than to Liam. Liam smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I guess I've always been different," he said quietly. "Even in heaven, I never quite fit in. The others always said I was too sensitive, too curious." "That much is obvious," Satan replied, though there was no malice in his tone. He studied the angel for a moment before adding, "Sensitivity isn't necessarily a weakness, you know. It's what makes you, you." Liam blinked, surprised by the unexpected kindness in Satan's words. "Thank you," he said softly, his cheeks flushing faintly. Satan immediately straightened, his usual smirk returning as he waved a dismissive hand. "Don't get used to it, Angel. I'm not in the habit of giving compliments." Liam chuckled, a light, musical sound that sent an unfamiliar warmth through Satan's chest. "Noted," he said, his smile growing. They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them softening into something more comfortable. Satan found himself oddly at ease in the angel's presence, though he couldn't quite understand why. There was something about Liam, his innocence, his vulnerability, his unwavering hope, that drew him in despite himself. When the sun, or whatever passed for a sun in this realm, began to set, casting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Satan finally spoke. "We should head back," he said, his voice low. "The jungle isn't safe at night, even for me." Liam nodded, standing and brushing off his robes. "Thank you for bringing me here," he said, his eyes shining with gratitude. "I won't forget this." Satan didn't respond, merely motioning for Liam to follow as he led the way back to the palace. But as they walked, he couldn't help but glance back at the angel, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't quite control. He didn't know what this connection was, or why it seemed to be growing stronger with every moment they spent together. But one thing was certain. Liam had awakened something in him, something buried deep beneath centuries of darkness and apathy. And that terrified him far more than any threat in his realm. The walk back to the palace was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Liam, still marveling at the sights and wonders of this strange realm, occasionally stole glances at Satan. There was a heaviness in the demon's posture that Liam hadn't noticed before, a quiet intensity as if he were battling something unseen. When they reached the palace gates, Satan paused, his hand resting on the cold black iron. "Go to your room and rest, Angel," he said, his voice softer than usual. "You'll need your strength to adjust to this place." Liam hesitated, sensing an underlying emotion in Satan's tone, something unspoken, something vulnerable. "Satan," he began, his voice tentative. "Thank you. For everything." Satan turned to him, his golden eyes locking onto Liam's. For a moment, the usual arrogance and teasing were absent, replaced by something raw and unguarded. "Don't thank me," he said gruffly. "I didn't do it for you." Liam smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but it still means something to me." Satan's gaze flickered, his wings twitching as he tore his eyes away. "Go," he said, almost harshly, before turning and disappearing into the shadows of the palace. Liam returned to his room, but sleep didn't come easily. He lay on the soft bed, his wings draped over the edges, and stared at the ornate ceiling. His thoughts were consumed by Satan, his sharp words, his intense gaze, the moments of unexpected gentleness that seemed to slip through his carefully constructed walls. Why did Satan, the king of hell, care for his well-being at all? Why did he bring him to the glowing valley, or speak to him as though he were more than just an intruder in this dark world? Liam couldn't make sense of it, but he couldn't deny the strange pull he felt toward the demon. It was as if, beneath all his power and darkness, there was something more, a flicker of light that even Satan didn't realize he possessed. In his private chambers, Satan sat in silence, his hands resting on his knees as he stared into the roaring flames of the fireplace. He should have felt nothing but annoyance toward the angel. Liam was a disruption, an intrusion into his carefully controlled realm, but instead, Satan found himself drawn to the boy's innocence, his quiet resilience, his unshakable hope in the face of everything this world represented. It was maddening. Satan clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms. He had spent centuries perfecting his detachment, his cold indifference. He ruled with power, fear, and absolute control, never allowing anyone to get too close. And yet, this fragile little angel had managed to crack the surface with nothing more than a soft smile and a pair of bright, trusting eyes. The firelight danced across Satan's sharp features as he closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. "What are you doing to me, angel?" he muttered under his breath, his voice heavy with frustration and something else he couldn't quite name. The next morning, Liam awoke to the sound of soft knocking at his door. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, his wings stretching instinctively. "Come in," he called, his voice still laced with sleep. The door opened, and a demon servant entered, bowing low. "The Lord of the Underworld requests your presence in the dining hall." Liam blinked, startled. He wants to see me." The servant nodded, retreating without another word. Liam dressed quickly, his mind racing with questions. When he entered the grand dining hall, he found Satan seated at the head of the long, dark table. A spread of food, strange but surprisingly appetizing, was laid out before him. Satan looked up, his golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You're late," he said, though there was no real bite in his tone. "I didn't know you'd want to eat with me," Liam replied, taking a hesitant step forward. Satan gestured for him to sit. "Don't overthink it. Sit, eat. You'll need your strength." Liam obeyed, settling into a chair near Satan. As he began to eat, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this invitation than Satan was letting on. But he didn't press. Instead, he focused on the meal, quietly grateful for the moment of peace. As they ate, Satan watched him, his expression unreadable. For all his power and control, Satan couldn't deny the growing warmth in his chest whenever Liam was near. And that warmth was beginning to scare him. Satan watched Liam with an intensity that was hard to miss. The angel, oblivious to the weight of his gaze, focused on the strange but delicious food in front of him. Satan noted the way Liam's delicate fingers moved, the slight flutter of his wings whenever he became curious about a particular dish. It was disarming, annoyingly so. Liam, finally noticing the prolonged silence, looked up at Satan. "You're not eating," he said softly, tilting his head. His wide, innocent eyes seemed to pierce through the barriers Satan had so carefully constructed. Satan smirked, leaning back in his chair and resting an arm on the table. "I don't need to eat," he said smoothly. "This is for you. Consider it hospitality." Liam blinked, clearly taken aback. "Hospitality? From the King of Hell?" His lips curved into a faint smile. "That's unexpected." Satan's smirk faltered for a moment, replaced by something more genuine. "You keep saying things like that, Angel, and I might start thinking you're trying to flatter me." "I'm just being honest," Liam replied, his voice steady but kind. "You've been kinder to me than I ever imagined you would be." Satan's gaze darkened, though not with anger. He stood abruptly, his towering frame casting a shadow over the table. "Finish your meal. I have things to attend to," he said curtly, before turning to leave the room. Liam watched him go, confusion flickering across his face. There was something strange about Satan, something that went beyond the darkness he ruled over. For all his sharp edges and biting remarks, there was a softness buried deep within him, one that Liam could feel in the quiet moments when Satan let his guard down. Later that day, Liam found himself wandering the palace halls. The architecture was dark and imposing, yet intricate and beautiful in its own way. He passed servants and guards who glanced at him curiously, but said nothing. Eventually, he found himself in a massive library, its shelves stretching up toward a vaulted ceiling that seemed to disappear into shadows. "Impressive, isn't it?" Liam jumped, spinning around to see Satan leaning casually against the doorway, his arms crossed. His golden eyes glinted in the dim light. "I didn't mean to intrude," Liam said quickly, his wings fluttering nervously. "You're not intruding," Satan replied, stepping into the room. "This library is as much yours as it is mine now." Liam's brow furrowed. "Mine? Why would you say that?" Satan stopped in front of him, his gaze locking onto Liam's. "Because you're here," he said simply. "Whether I like it or not, you've become a part of this place, and a part of me." Liam's breath caught in his throat. There was a weight to Satan's words, a vulnerability that he hadn't expected. "Satan," he began, but the demon cut him off. "Don't," Satan said, his voice low but firm. "Don't read too much into it, Angel. I'm not the sentimental type." Liam frowned, stepping closer. "Maybe you're not as cold as you want everyone to think." Satan laughed, the sound deep and almost bitter. "You're naive, Angel. You think you can see something in me that doesn't exist." "Maybe," Liam admitted, his voice soft but steady. "Or maybe you're just afraid to let it show." For a moment, Satan said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, he reached out and gently brushed a strand of Liam's golden hair away from his face. The touch was so light, so unexpected, that Liam froze. "You're too bold for your own good," Satan murmured, his voice low and almost fond. "And you're not as cruel as you pretend to be," Liam countered, his cheeks flushing. Satan's smirk returned, though it was softer this time. "Careful, Angel," he said, his fingers lingering near Liam's cheek. "You're playing a dangerous game." "Maybe I am," Liam replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I think it's worth the risk." Satan's eyes searched Liam's for a long moment, as if trying to decipher the angel's unwavering faith. Finally, he pulled back, his hand dropping to his side. "You're impossible," he muttered, though there was no real frustration in his tone. "And you're not as heartless as you think," Liam said with a small smile. Satan shook his head, turning away. "Don't push your luck, Angel," he called over his shoulder as he walked toward the door. But as he left, a faint smile played on his lips.